There are people in your life right now who cannot be trusted. Not because they wear it on their face, not because they hurt you loudly, but because they hide their danger behind charm, helpfulness, and subtle manipulation. Carl Jung didn't just study the mind. He studied what people hide. And he made it clear. The most dangerous people are not the loud ones, but the quiet distortions who blend in, pretending to care while quietly dismantling you from the inside. They don't always shout. They don't always abuse. Sometimes they smile. That's what makes them dangerous. That's why you keep missing the signs. That's why Jung made it his life's work to understand not just the persona, but the shadow. Because people don't show you who they are. They show you what they think will work. And if you're not aware, you'll give your time, energy, trust, even love to someone who was never safe to begin with. So Jung laid out 6 patterns, 6 psychological masks, 6 personality types that feel harmless at first, but quietly destroy you if you're not awake. Let's begin. 1. The chronic victim. This is the person who never takes responsibility. Everything that happens to them is someone else's fault. They are always suffering, always attacked, always done wrong. On the surface, you feel bad for them. You empathize. You help. You become emotionally invested in their recovery. But Jung saw this clearly. People who live in permanent victimhood are often hiding deep manipulation. Because if you are always the victim, you never have to be accountable. You never have to change. You never have to confront your own darkness. The chronic victim uses their pain as a weapon. They guilt trip. They twist reality. They pull sympathy out of you and turn it into obligation. You don't help them. You end up carrying them. And the worst part? They don't want healing. They want control. Jung warned us, when someone is always a victim, they have likely fused with their shadow, the part of them that thrives on emotional manipulation under the disguise of helplessness. These people will never change, because to change would be to lose the only power they have, your pity. And if you don't distance yourself from them, you'll start to feel guilty for not being broken yourself. 2. The charming mirror. Jung called this the persona trap, someone who reflects back to you exactly what you want to see. They're agreeable, supportive. They laugh at your jokes. They admire your dreams. They validate your insecurities. At first, they feel like your biggest supporter. But slowly, you notice something strange. You don't actually know who they are, because they're not showing you anything real. They're mirroring you to gain trust. Jung wrote that when a person over-identifies with their persona, they become a mask, and the real self stays hidden, protected, untouched, and unaccountable. The charming mirror is dangerous because they feel safe. But what's behind the mask? Nothing. No substance, no stability, no consistent values. Only the ability to adapt, to mimic, to impress. They're not loyal to you. They're loyal to your approval. And the moment you stop admiring them, they vanish, or worse, turn against you. You didn't meet them. You met your reflection in their performance. And trusting someone like that is like shaking hands with smoke. 3. The passive-aggressive enabler. This one is subtle. They don't openly criticize. They don't fight you directly. They let you speak, and then they suggest. They hint. They undermine. This person will nod when you share your dream, and later say something like, "That's ambitious. I just don't want you to be disappointed." Or, "You're so brave for trying that. I don't think I'd ever risk failing like that." Sounds supportive, right? But it isn't. Jung described this dynamic as the hidden shadow of the helper. These people don't attack your decisions. They slowly erode your confidence through emotional suggestion. They present doubt as concern. They present fear as logic. They present judgment as maturity. And if you're not conscious, you'll internalize their limitations as your own. Jung believed that this type is especially dangerous because they pretend to empower you, while quietly making sure you never outgrow them. Because if you succeed without them, they lose their invisible grip. They lose relevance. And for the enabler, that's a silent ego death. So they clip your wings before you ever take flight, and call it support. 4. The secret competitor. This person isn't competing with the world. They're competing with you. But not openly. They pretend to be your friend. They applaud your success. They act like they're happy for you. But every time something good happens for you, they find a way to make it about them. They minimize it. They redirect the attention. They tell their own story, slightly better, slightly more impressive. Jung believed that this type is driven by unconscious inferiority. They don't hate you. They resent what you reflect back at them, their own inadequacy. And instead of owning that feeling and growing from it, they compete secretly. They copy your ideas and pretend they were theirs. They offer backhanded compliments. They only celebrate you when they're ahead, never when you're above. You feel it, in the tension, in the forced praise, in the subtle shifts. And if you ignore it, you'll keep pouring trust into someone who sees you as a threat, not a friend. And here's the twist. When you fail, they'll feel relief. But they won't say it. They'll just say, "I was afraid this might happen. I tried to warn you." This person is not a teammate. They are a mirror competitor who plays the role of support just to stay close enough to sabotage you emotionally. Jung warned, never trust someone who can't clap when it's not their turn to win. 4 out of 6 revealed. Each one more subtle than the last. Each one more dangerous the longer they go undetected. Now, we'll expose the final 2. The manipulative wise one, and the seductive empath who hides control under compassion. Plus, how Carl Jung believed these types form through early trauma, an unintegrated shadow. And Jung believed these 2 were the hardest to spot, because they often appear wise, helpful, or even healing. They don't control you through force. They control you through your need for love, growth, or clarity. Let's continue. 5. The spiritual narcissist, the wise one. This is the person who presents themselves as enlightened, mature, grounded, emotionally advanced. They speak softly. They quote philosophy. They reference healing, alignment, shadow work, and mindfulness. They present themselves as above conflict, above ego. But in truth, they're deeply attached to being seen as superior. Jung would call this a split psyche, where the conscious mind clings to spiritual identity, while the unconscious shadow leaks out as quiet superiority, control, and judgment. The danger: they don't dominate you by arguing. They dominate you by always being the calm one, making you feel emotional, unhealed, or spiritually inferior anytime you push back. They say things like, "Sounds like a trigger you haven't dealt with yet." I'm just holding space. It's not my responsibility to fix your projection. You're still reacting. You have inner work to do. It sounds wise, but it's really a power play. They use emotional language to invalidate your reality. You can't win an argument because they'll never admit to one. You can't confront them because they'll reframe your anger as a flaw in you. And the more conscious you try to become, the more they shift the frame to stay above you, silently, spiritually, untouchable. Jung warned about this especially because the wise one often builds their persona out of unintegrated ego. They didn't kill their ego. They just gave it robes and crystals. They buried it under concepts and called it transcendence. And the more you trust them to guide you, the more power they gain. Not by helping you grow, but by keeping you small, confused, and always needing their clarity. They don't want equals. They want students. They don't want healing. They want authority. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake their emotional stillness for depth, when in fact, it's just performance. 6. The empath who always ends up in control. Jung wrote often about projection, how people assign their own needs, wounds, and intentions onto others unconsciously. And the 6th type is a master of this, the empathic controller. They feel everything. They sense energy. They pick up on moods, body language, tension, subtext. They cry easily. They comfort you often. They make you feel deeply seen. At first, this seems like a gift. It feels like connection. But over time, it becomes something else. Control through sensitivity. You start adjusting your behavior so you don't disturb them. You suppress your reactions so you don't hurt them. You hesitate to express frustration because they'll say, "That energy really affects me." And before you realize it, you're not expressing yourself at all. You're managing them because they've convinced you their pain is your fault. Jung warned about this subtle danger, that many people who claim to be highly sensitive are actually projecting unhealed chaos outward and demanding the world organize itself around their wounds. This is where the empath becomes toxic. They don't want connection. They want emotional safety at your expense. And if you fail to meet it, they break down, and you become the bad guy. Suddenly, you're insensitive. You're cold. You're unstable. You're responsible for their spiral. But it's not your spiral. It's theirs, and they've never learned to hold it. So they place it on you. And if you're not careful, you'll spend months, even years, trying to regulate someone who never took responsibility for themselves. You'll mistake emotional chaos for depth. You'll mistake sensitivity for purity. You'll mistake control for closeness. And by the time you realize it, your identity will be wrapped around someone else's emotional storm. That's not love. That's psychological submission. And Jung's advice? Walk away. Because this kind of person will never say they're dangerous. They'll say they're just feeling too much. And unless you are deeply rooted in yourself, you will start to believe them. You'll believe their pain is your fault. Their chaos is your burden. Their breakdowns are your responsibility. But they're not. You didn't break them. You just got too close. The deeper warning. Now that you've heard all 6 types, you might ask, why do these people exist? Why do they move this way? And Jung's answer is brutally clear. because they never met their shadow. So now they make you carry it. They never faced the part of them that's manipulative, so they project it onto you. They never admitted their need for control, so they control people in the name of love, support, or guidance. They never took responsibility for their pain, so they made it your job to fix. These people aren't rare. They're everywhere. And they thrive in spaces where people don't know how to defend their energy. Jung believed the only protection was self-awareness, to spot the mask, to see through the kindness, to hear what's not being said, and walk away before you need proof. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, we'll go beyond the list into how you stop attracting these people, why your shadow makes you tolerate them, and how to permanently become someone they can't manipulate, use, or break. By now, you've seen them. The 6 people Carl Jung said you should never trust, not because they're always evil, but because they're deeply unaware of themselves. And when someone has no awareness of their own shadow, they make you live in it. They become the chronic victim, the charming mirror, the quiet enabler, the hidden competitor, the spiritual narcissist, the empathic controller. They don't always come to destroy you. They come to feed from you. To Jung, this wasn't moral failure. This was a psychic pattern, a survival system of the unconscious trying to hold itself together by externalizing pain, control, and emotional confusion. And if you don't recognize the pattern, you'll think it's just bad luck. You'll think you keep attracting bad people. You'll think you're being punished. But Jung would say, you're not being punished. You're being mirrored. Because here's the real warning most people miss. You attract what you haven't integrated. Let that sink in. If you're always attracting manipulators, there's a part of you that's still afraid to stand in your own truth. If you're always surrounded by victims, there's a part of you that needs to be needed in order to feel valuable. If you're constantly betrayed by charming people, you're still worshiping external approval more than internal clarity. That's why this video isn't just about who to avoid. It's about why you tolerated them in the first place. And Jung believed the answer always lives in one place: your shadow. The shadow attracts the mask. Jung taught that the shadow is everything you've repressed. The parts of you were told were too much, or too selfish, or too intense, or not lovable. So you buried them. You became nice. You became helpful. You became agreeable. You became emotionally intelligent. You became whatever would get you accepted. But here's the trade-off. You lost your edge. You lost your instincts. You lost your barrier to harm. Because when you repress your anger, you tolerate disrespect. When you repress your intuition, you ignore red flags. When you repress your self-protection, you keep letting in the people who pretend to love you, and then slowly consume you. Jung didn't want you to become cold. He wanted you to become whole. And to do that, you have to stop pretending that your love is limitless, that your patience is eternal, and that your trust should be freely given. Because it shouldn't be. Not everyone deserves access to you, especially not the people who live unconsciously. Because here's the brutal truth. Some people are not learning. They're just repeating. They've been the same for 10 years. They're not doing shadow work. They're not evolving. They're not growing with you. They're just adapting their language to hide their same old patterns. And unless you become the kind of person who values inner alignment over outer harmony, you will keep bending for people who wouldn't stretch an inch for you. What to do now? If this video hit you hard, good. It means something in you is waking up. It means you're done being easy to manipulate. It means the old version of you, the one who needed to be liked, needed to fix, needed to feel good, is finally tired. So here's how you move forward. 1. Audit your circle. Start asking, who drains me? Who confuses me? Who am I constantly explaining myself to? If someone constantly needs context just to treat you right, they're not confused. They're avoiding accountability. Let them go. Silently. Without guilt. Jung believed withdrawal is one of the strongest acts of consciousness. Not because you hate them, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself to keep the peace. 2. Let your shadow speak. Stop trying to be perfect. Let yourself say no. Let yourself get angry. Let yourself question people's intentions. Your shadow isn't evil. It's protective. It's the part of you that remembers who you are when you're being emotionally gaslit into forgetting. Let that part rise. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If you want peace, stop performing for it. Integrate the part of you that can walk away. That can set a boundary. That can say, I'm not available for this anymore. 3. Stop explaining. The people who deserve your energy won't need you to justify your boundaries. They'll feel them. They'll respect them. And they'll match you with their own clarity. But the toxic ones, they'll demand explanations. They'll guilt trip you. They'll paint you as the problem. Let them. Jung didn't believe in convincing unconscious people to see your light. He believed in becoming so grounded in yourself that their confusion no longer slows you down. 4. Trust what you felt the first time. Most people aren't confused. They're just hoping they're wrong. But you weren't. That moment you felt the energy shift. That moment you hesitated before trusting. That moment your gut said, something's off here. That wasn't paranoia. That was your subconscious reading patterns before your mind caught up. Start listening to it. Because the people Jung warned us about don't show up with warning signs. They show up with flattery. They show up with emotional stories. They show up with alignment and vulnerability and healing talk. But time always tells. And when it does, you better be far enough away that it no longer costs you anything. The final word. Carl Jung didn't want you to fear the world. He wanted you to stop fearing your own knowing. The more shadow you integrate, the fewer toxic people get close. Not because you're hiding, but because your energy no longer gives them entry. You stop explaining. You stop fixing. You stop justifying your standards. And without ever raising your voice, you become someone no manipulator can reach. No narcissist can fool. No competitor can rattle. Because you are now the person Jung wanted you to be. Awake, whole, and impossible to trick.